Now, what students can wear at school is set school by school, but the Human Rights Commission says it's time they had guidelines to make sure the rules are more inclusive. This is the guide. It says things like Māori should be able to wear pounamu instead of a tie, and advises against wearing offensive symbols like the Confederate flag or a swastika. I'm joined now by Race Relations Commissioner Ming Foon and Tabor Khan, the founder of the Khadija Leadership Network. Good morning to you both. Thanks very much for being with us on AM this morning. Ming, if I can please start with you. The guidelines around pounamu, heitiki, are those just recommendations for Māori students, or should any student be able to feel that they can wear that?
Yeah, morning, Melissa, and to my colleague Tabor. The guidelines are there to support the human rights of people, and also the right to education, the right to culture, the right to religion and faith, and also acknowledge the tiriti of Waitangi in action. So generally, the matters, the heitiki, pounamu are for Māori. They are a cultural identity of Māori, and so under the treaty, they are should be allowed to actually adorn those at school.
Which seems perfectly fair enough, and you would hope that they do feel that they can do that in schools already. But how do you ask a student then to prove they're Māori, or how do you say who can and who can't?
Well, I think one of the main things is to actually value your students. The important thing is to actually continue to allow students in a safe environment, in a respectful environment, that has been created by the school to actually attend school and not be asked about their culture or anything like that. As long as the children turn up to school, it's great. I mean, it's a terrible statistic that only up to about 55% of our children actually go to school on a daily, weekly basis.
Yeah, and that was one of the comments in this report. A student said being in class is more important than being in the correct uniform. Tabor, just in terms of that feeling of safety and security at school, in your community, do students feel safe going to school and wearing their cultural items?
Yeah, I guess the response is very mixed, right? It depends on the school and the school's cultural environment. We've seen several incidents in the last couple of years where girls who wear the hijab feel, quite threatened. They receive a lot of racist comments towards them, and of course we've had incidents of violence as well, which is really, really unfortunate. So it really does depend on the school and the school's cultural environment, and how's the school board, the principal, the teachers kind of leading the environment that the students are in. So really the response is very mixed, but I think the guidelines are a great way of inviting people to think about a more inclusive environment for the schools.
So you think the guidelines might empower those students to feel more confident in wearing what they want in terms of their cultural
Absolutely. I mean, I think it's a great way of inviting people to think about what is their cultural identity and, talking about it and being more open and tolerant to be able to exchange ideas about what it is they're wearing and why.
What about being prescriptive around what that is? So in terms of asking if a hijab is in school colours, is that okay?
I think so. I mean, I think, look, colours is really not the issue here, right? We're trying to make sure that people feel safe. They feel like they can express their cultural or religious identity, in the case of the hijab, and that they're able to still follow the guidelines that the school sets for them. Colours don't really make that big a difference. It's really about making sure that the principle and the essence of the practice is kept and maintained.
Ming, if I can turn back to you, in terms of hair length, this is a rule that many schools have, and these guidelines say that Māori men who have traditionally had long hair should be able to wear it long. So should schools be able to dictate hair length at all?
Yeah, they could if they want to, but it would be nice for schools to actually acknowledge the cultural differences between cultures, and also allow people to wear their hair length at the length that they should be able to.
What do you think is the difference between telling a young Māori man that he's allowed to have long hair, and a young European woman, Asian woman, that she's not?
Actually, generally, Māori men actually tie it up into into a knot.
But you're still saying that they can have long hair. So if you're saying that they can, but they have to tie it up, that would go along with what schools are asking for in any case. I'm just wondering, and I totally understand that it is tradition and that this seems fair enough, but I wonder whether it's a bit of a minefield for schools as to who they say can have long hair and who can't.
It can be a minefield. Yeah. Long hair, short hair, at the end of the day, we just want children to be going to school, feel safe in that environment, and they just have the right to do that.
Tabor, what about things like offensive slogans? So the report says, as I mentioned before, that you couldn't go to school wearing a swastika, which I don't think anybody would, and nobody would argue with either. But I actually noticed on Twitter recently there was a story about, it was Pink Shirt Day, the anti-bullying day, and a student at a school in New Zealand went to school in a red Trump supporting T-shirt. Would that be okay?
Yeah, so I guess this is where the minefield comes in. And I think, look, we're talking about differences between cultural, religious and political sort of, affiliations and expressions through the way you dress. So just going back to what Matua Ming was saying in the question around the long hair, for example, for the Sikh community, which is a religious community, long hair is important. They usually tie it up, but it's in a turban, and it can be for men and women. And so this is where I think it's really important for schools to be open to have that discussion and then be able to set their individual, guidelines around what works for their students or not. Because let's be honest, not all schools are as diverse as we would like them to be. And so some schools need to work a little bit more to be inclusive of all of their students than others do, and so forth. Now, in relation to this Trump T-shirt, that is a political expression. It might be offensive to some, but it isn't actually about your, you're not actually... And if you compare it to, say, the swastika, for example, we're talking about two very different ball games here. Yes, some would say Trump has actually been very dangerous to their lives, but I guess it really is where you set the boundaries in relation to what is safe and what isn't safe for your students.
So you think there's a line, and actually the Trump T-shirt doesn't cross the line?
I think it's a discussion that the school should have, or wherever this young person wore the T-shirt, they have the opportunity to discuss whether they're comfortable with that or not. Now, if I was in that school and someone wore a Trump T-shirt, given that I'm of a Muslim background, I would feel quite threatened because of Trump's policies and of course the war and so forth. So yeah, I guess I would be against it. But would I actually blanketly make a rule that actually no one can wear Trump T-shirts? That's really not my call to make. So
I just wonder if this is well-meaning, the guidelines, and I don't think I can fault personally anything in here, but with yourself and the Race Relations Commissioner saying that this is a minefield for schools, you have to wonder whether it's going to be helpful for them.
I would say for me, this is an invitation. So it's not necessarily a minefield. It's a minefield in practice, but it's nonetheless an invitation and inviting schools to actually think about how they could be more inclusive of cultural attire. And I think we are great at doing so much of that anyway. So I don't think we should shy away from that. That would be what I would say.
Wonderful. Race Relations Commissioner Ming Phoon and founder of the Khadija Leadership Network, Tabor Khan. Thank you very much for joining us.